This is a very special episode of the podcast because it features you as we answer questions from our listeners today on the Must Increase podcast. Welcome to the Must Increase podcast, where our mission is to increase His name through your church. I am your host, Luke Clayton, and I'm joined by my co-host and podcast producer, Bo Snyder. Bo, thanks for being here.
Here it is, Luke. I've been looking forward to this episode for quite a while. Episode 14 of the podcast, and this is when we're going to finally answer the questions, like you said. And, we've been getting questions from, you can email questions to podcast@mustincrease.com, and we had some of those, and we're able to get on a couple calls with people as well. So I've really been looking forward to this. This is going to be fun.
Yeah, this is a great episode, and we always are wanting to answer your questions, to hear from you, and so we're looking forward to this. But before we begin, I wanted to thank you for listening, and hope that if you haven't yet, that you will subscribe wherever you're listening to a podcast, and that way, every time we release new content, the latest episodes will be downloaded right to your device and whatever app you may be listening to podcasts in. And so remember to subscribe to the podcast, and thank you, as always, for listening. So today we're answering your questions, and remember, like we said, you can ask your questions you can email us at podcast@mustincrease.com, or you can always, mention us on Facebook or Twitter, or comment on something on Facebook, or mention us on Twitter, whatever it may be. Just feel free to ask us questions in any way that you please, and we do read every email and every question we get and do our best to get to all of them, which is why we've dedicated today's episode to answering questions. So, Bo, I think you've got a couple of questions, or maybe a question or two to start out with.
I do. I'm going to this is one that came in by email from Paul in Cincinnati, and here it is. What are some methods and tools that help with time management? Gold question there, because we all have, we do not have a lot of time. Yeah. Time is one of those things that, we're always constantly trying to figure out, hey, how can I make this quicker? How can I, have more time for this? And, things that really matter. So first of all, great question here.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, this is one of the things as we talk to church leaders that deal with media, they say, hey, we know that we should be doing more and that we could be doing more, but we just don't have the time. And so just some real practical tools, I guess. One of the things, I guess a lot of this, I should say, though, it's not necessarily about the tools as much as it is your mentality. Your philosophy on time management. Let me just give you a personal example. I used to really let my email kind of run my life. It's kind of like I always had my email open on my computer, just kind of waiting for a notification to come in. And as soon as I would get an email, it's kind of like I'd stop everything I was doing and just address that one email. And you know how many times or how often that one email was truly something urgent I had to deal with? Probably maybe like 1 out of every 100, if that. And so something that I just did is I just kind of recently have gone what I call notification free. I don't keep my email open all day. I just check it 2 to 3 times a day. I turn notifications off on my phone. So I'll only get essential notifications, if you will, messages and phone calls. Don't get any social media notifications and whatever. So that's just something I've done. And I know that's more of a philosophy and mindset than it is really than a practical tool, but that has been a huge help to me just in recent weeks and months.
The best advice I can give when it comes to time management, if you can delegate things to other people, and there are certain things, if it comes to media, there are a lot of things. Now, just maybe through next week, make a list of all the things that you do in a week, okay? Then the next week, look through that list and say, I'm going to make a mark by these things. These are things that I have to do. Like, no one else can do these things. No one else is trained. No one else, has the tools or the know-how to do these things. And step number 1, make a list of those things. And then there are probably things that you do every week that maybe you like them or you don't, but somebody else can actually do them. So there are things that, Luke, both and I have given up in our, jobs and just, kind of our job descriptions as, hey, even though I like doing this, it's not the best use of my time. So go through there, Paul, make a list of things that you do and say, hey, I can actually delegate this to someone. Maybe someone will enjoy doing this more than I do, or maybe it's, just something, maybe they might not even enjoy it, but it's something better suited for them that helps you capitalize on your time to help you do the things that are more important to Paul.
Yeah, and here's another thing I'm going to tag onto that. You mentioned making a list of things you do. You'll be surprised how many people go week to week and they don't realize what they do. They just kind of do it by rote memory. So yeah, making that list is huge, because sometimes you might find that there actually may be several items that you're doing that you don't need to be doing anymore. Maybe they aren't even stuff that you delegate. It's just that you just get rid of. You just don't do it. No one does it because it's really not all that important. And so, yeah, I guess those answers are more of just mentality and mindset. But here's what I found. I've got different apps that I use and things on my computer to help me keep track of my tasks. But the truth is, I know some people and they write out a list on paper. It's whatever tools work for you that work best. But having that mindset and that mentality will really help you as you manage your time moving forward. So, hey, it looks like we've actually got a few questions that are going to come to us by way of a phone call. So let's get over here to the phones. Up first, we've got Pastor William Tyson calling from Washington, D.C. Pastor Tyson, how are you?
Doing great. How are you?
Well, we are doing great. How can we help you today?
My question is related to websites and how to best utilize websites to promote your ministry and to use it effectively.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, start off by saying that's a pretty broad question. I mean, there's a lot of good answers that we can give, but the number one thing that we tell people whenever we work with websites is to make sure that your website is streamlined for the visitor. And so what that means is you don't want to overload them with information that doesn't pertain to them, particularly, obviously, with your church website. They want to know simple things like where you're located, when are your services, things of that nature. And you really want to give them a streamlined experience, just giving them all of the basics. Depending on your area and the type of visitors that you're getting to your church, it's not always super relevant to tell people about maybe your specific, something like your statement of faith or your doctrinal beliefs. Not to say that shouldn't be included on your website, but it shouldn't really be mainstream, if you will. So you want to tell people where we located, when are our services, and you just want to give that general feel that, things are, we're welcoming, we want you to be here, and things of that nature.
If I have an idea or a website thought and I want to develop something, what are the benefits of working with a ministry such as, or a business such as Must Increase versus going out to, do it myself, if you will? What are some of the benefits of working with, a professional, cost and, just expertise, I assume, but just curious about your feedback on working with a professional versus trying to do it on your own.
Yeah, well, it's kind of the same idea goes into, working on your car. Some people are very skilled mechanics. I am definitely not. I can, even if I need an oil change, I take it to the mechanic. I take it to a professional who can do it right. And hey, if I have to give in my man card to admit that, I just did. But we can, so you have to look at it that way. There are people who are very proficient in maybe something media related that could potentially handle it on their own. So you have to consider that. If you say, yeah, there's a lot of do-it-yourself web platforms out there that you can sign up for, and and they're good. They're not bad, but having a professional kind of in your corner, if you will, to say, hey, here's some things to try. We've done it. We've been making websites now for however long, and we can help you, kind of get the best results. Obviously, that's your benefit. The other key is time. I heard it put the other day this way. I heard of a guy, he said, hey, I really enjoy, the web. It was actually about websites specifically. He said, I really enjoy developing my website, but I'm not that good at it, and so it's not very effective. Well, then the question was asked, well, what is your time worth? And in this case, he was a business, and so he said, well, I usually bill at $150 an hour. And he said, well, then the question was asked, well, what can you hire a good web developer for? He said, about $50 an hour. So he said, why would you be paying $150 an hour to someone who is a bad web developer, in that of you've admitted you are a bad web developer? And so that's a good way of understanding. I know in ministry, those business principles of, hey, hourly billing don't apply, but you have to think as a pastor or church leader, we always try to get them to understand this. You're called to do true ministry. So you're called to preach, you're called to, counsel, you're called to do these things that are truly pastoral. And you have to know your limits and saying, hey, this is something that maybe is more on the media side of things or the operational side of things that, you know what, maybe I could do it, but my time is more valuable than that, and my time is better spent for example, reaching out to people, visiting people, or preparing for my sermon. And so you always have to consider that.
Well, I do thank you for all that you're doing. You've been a great help with our Bust Them In website, and it's always been well received when we've sent folks to it, and we appreciate the work that you guys have done on it. And so thank you for that.
Well, thank you, Pastor Tyson. Yes, it's been a privilege to work with you over the years, your Bust Them In ministry. By the way, where do people go to learn a little bit more about that ministry?
They can go to www.bustthemin.com, and there are videos and basically everything you need to know about that ministry. And it's been a great blessing to have that ministry. It's 2.5 years old now and doing well.
All right, great. Yes, so be sure to head over there, check that website out. Well, Pastor Tyson, thanks again for calling in. We enjoyed talking to you.
Thank you so much. We'll talk to you soon.
Next up, we've got Matt in Philadelphia. Hey, Matt, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks, Luke. How you doing today, man?
Hey, we are just living the dream here. Hey, how can we help you today?
Hey, so we're going into a process where we want to start rebranding our church. And the big thing, so currently our tagline, we feel like it's a little presumptuous. We refer to ourselves as the caring church. And I think that's a little presumptuous. Like, what creatively thinking, like, how do we walk ourselves down a path where we find something that conveys the message of caring and connection that we have with our community, in reference to our branding and trying to form a new marketing model for our ministry?
Yeah, Matt, that is an excellent question. And really, probably there's no set answer that I could give here. There is so much that goes into branding and positioning the messaging of your church, and it really is a process. It's not just something that happens overnight. So, you're talking about how your church markets itself as the caring church, and that in and of itself is not a bad thing to advertise and promote, but I can understand how you say, well, that might seem presumptuous and assuming, making it more about centric of, well, our church is this. And I think one of my main things I could recommend to you is, as you make a transition here, caring is a great thing to communicate. Maybe just communicate it in a different way. So, for example, instead of stating that we are the caring church, maybe it's as simple as starting by saying something like, we care. And that changes it from stating that you are something to stating that it's something that you do. And I do understand where you're coming from. When you state we are this, well, that is just presumptuous that, oh yeah, you're going to assume that we are that and that we are telling you what we are before you've had the opportunity to really, in your mind, tell us who we are. So if we tell you what we do and that we just make one simple change, at our church, we care. That is not, I don't think that's presumptuous to state. So maybe that's something you can do, a small change you can make. And that's a subtle change. It's small. Many people aren't going to even notice it, other than subliminally it'll make a difference to them. So once again, the branding process is something that is a slow transition whether you're doing a new brand or a rebrand, but it is something, whether it's from a visual standpoint or, like I said, from the messaging side, which is what you're talking about, really is something that can be done. So great question. Thanks for calling in. And the thing about branding at our church or organization that matters is that, once again, I know I sound a little repetitive, but it is a process, and it's not something that we always can just hurry along or make happen overnight.
If for those out there that are listening, maybe they're going through a similar thing and they want to, rebrand their church, or they're thinking about it, it's okay to take your time, because when it comes to branding is the image that your community has of you. We've talked about that in the past. It's, we can go into that deeper, but we're not going to today. It's so why would you rush something? Hey, I want someone to, think this of me. Oh, that's it right there. It's like, no, take your time, think about it, make it a process, and just make sure it's the right thing. I'd rather have churches or any business take a little bit of time to figure it out, do the right steps, make it the right process, than to just get into it and like, oh, we didn't really want to brand ourselves this way, but now we're kind of stuck with it.
A few years ago when we used to work with churches and they asked us about branding, a lot of times we'd say, well, start with a logo. But we've kind of changed our tone a little bit with that. We don't necessarily tell you to start with a logo, because it is so important that you don't want to just throw something together quick. You want to make sure that you're doing it right, that you've got a good, solid brand visually from a logo perspective, and the typeface that you use and colors and all that, but then also from a messaging perspective, because your brand is not just what you see, it's how someone in general just connects with you. So your messaging, your things like your mission statement, your purpose statement, all that. So all these things do take time to develop. And so we always say this, it's better to do it right than to rush it. I'd rather do it right than to rush. And so make sure that you are taking the time if you are going to be branding or rebranding your church anytime soon. So once again, that's a great question. Now, it looks like we've got Tim joining us from Raleigh, North Carolina. Tim, welcome to the Must Increase podcast.
Hey guys, how you guys doing? Thanks for taking my call today.
Yeah, we are so glad to be talking to you. How can we help?
Yeah, so our church is in the area of live stream. So live stream is something that we have been actively involved in, and it's an area that we firmly believe that is really just a great mission field, kind of, if you'd call it, and opportunities for us to expand that. And so we're looking at how we can expand live stream in our ministry, and really kind of curious. We're on a couple of different platforms right now. We are streaming on YouTube. We are on, of course, our own website. We go to Facebook, and we actually just recently added Twitch. And so we just tried streaming on Twitch. And so for us, the moderation of how to moderate, just curious if you have any tips or information on how we can better connect with our live stream audience. So it's not just them looking in and watching our service, but how can we actually make a connection with that audience?
Okay, yeah, that's a great question, and that's a very relevant question, because there's so many churches. Live stream's not a new concept, and so most churches are using, at this point, if they're most capable churches, I should say, probably even churches that we'd consider smaller are using it, but it's really about using it the right way that makes the difference. And so, you can put it out there, and that's just a good start, just to put it out there and have it somewhere where people can go watch, but you want interaction, you want engagement. And so you mentioned, you're streaming, I think they said, to Facebook and YouTube. And so that's always obviously a great place to start, because people can interact on Facebook, YouTube. They can comment, they can like, they can share. And so that obviously is a great place to start. But then I've seen churches actually, especially if they have their own live stream page, they kind of put in the subtext underneath of the live stream or whatever, encouraging you to comment, share your feedback, let us know what you think, almost like encouraging people to more or less like say amen or whatever, like kind of like that, like on the actual like comment on Facebook, and something too, or on Facebook or on the live stream page or wherever you're at. And something too you can consider is when you go to Facebook or YouTube or wherever it may be, like actually in the description, encouraging that, saying, hey, we want to hear your thoughts. Be sure to, comment as the service goes on. And if you really want to try something, I guess that's a little more out of the box, but there are some churches doing this. You can even maybe orchestrate it into your service to where the pastor or whoever's leading the service says, hey, we want to welcome you who are watching by way of live stream, and we want to encourage you to, if this is a help to you today, we want to hear about it. Be sure to put something in the comments or, like this video or whatever. And so those are a couple of ideas because, I think the ultimate goal of live stream is to get people to ultimately attend your church in person. I think that's definitely one of the main goals. And I know a lot of times it has some other reasons, such as, providing this type of resource for someone who maybe isn't able to come to church, who's sick or out of town or whatever it may be. But I think as far as with your community, you want to say, hey, here's kind of a window where you can literally look into a live service, and you want to communicate that, hey, we want to hear from you. We care about you. We're not just putting this on just to show you how quote unquote great our church is. We're doing this because we want to hear from you. And so those are a couple of thoughts on how you can engage your live stream audience and, further connect with them.
And I'll just add a couple things here, Tim. First of all, you're doing a fantastic job with offering it on YouTube, on your website, Facebook. I applaud you for all of that, because that is something that you're just taking it by the horns and saying, hey, we're going to do this and we're just going to use it as a tool. So great job there, first of all. And only, Luke hit the nail right on the head there with most of his stuff there. Only thing I would add is it's really acceptable to acknowledge the audience that is online. It used to be odd, years ago, but now people realize there are people watching. So to acknowledge them, hey, when it comes time for the offering, hey, you can text this number to give. And it kind of makes them feel like they are there as much as possible. Obviously, nothing is as real as the live thing, but anytime you can incorporate them into the service, always a plus there. Second thing, and I'm not sure what you use for your streaming service. What I would recommend is Boxcast for those that are listening. And this is something else that was really helpful at our home church. I did this in the past, is live stream doesn't have to end necessarily when the event ends, and this is just what I mean by that, is with Boxcast, it allows you to go back and edit the live stream and just maybe make a quick highlight, maybe pastor's best points, a really powerful part of the music, choir special, something like that. So if, someone wants to go back and, rewatch the live stream, you can actually clip it and make it, hey, this is just a highlight of the entire thing, just so, people don't have to sit and go through the entire, 60 minutes or whatever it is. But that would be my input for that. And once again, I applaud you for what you're doing already with it, really.
Yeah, and another solid question there, Tim. So thanks for calling in.
Switching gears back over to an email question. This is from Nicole in Anderson, Indiana. And her question is, for churches serving a large span of ages, how can we bridge the generational gap for promoting the ministries of the church?
Yeah, so here's my number one thing that comes to mind when I see a question like this. A lot of times we get this idea that the older generation, I guess we're talking about senior citizens, 55 plus, that they are afraid of technology or that they aren't using, the modern, things such as social media. But that's actually kind of not true. I see a lot of older people that have adapted. They've got smartphones. They've got iPads. They are on social media. In fact, shout out here, one of my biggest fans of our podcast and just our social media presence in general is my wife's grandma. And she is over 70 years old. And she is always connecting with us and on social media and liking our stuff. She's very active. And I know that she's probably exceptional in that how active she is on social media and on these technological devices or whatever. But by and large, there's a pretty large percentage of even the quote unquote older generation that is using this stuff, especially Facebook. There's just like everybody's on Facebook. Everybody that's over the age of 30 is on Facebook, it seems like. Now, yeah, that we could talk about the younger generation and, Snapchat and Instagram kind of taking over there. But saying all that to say, I think we say, well, how do we bridge the gap? Well, you just realize these tools are that, these technological tools and like I said, social media and things, they're here to stay. And really by now, most people I've started using them in some capacity. And I think you just realize that and you use them to, the best of your ability. You realize that this is a tool that God's given you to manage, and you use it to promote and grow His church and ultimately spread the truth of His gospel. And there's nothing wrong with that. So as far as bridging the gap, I've heard this said before: the truth of God's word and the truth of the message of Christ is timeless, in that it knows no boundaries. It knows no, as far as like, well, it's not relevant to old people or young people or what. No, it knows no limits. It is just as true to the 90-year-old as it is the 9-year-old. And you just have to realize that you've got that. And of course, you can do different things. Obviously, for kids ministry, you'll want to, use branding that's more kid friendly and more fun. And maybe for adult ministry, something that's just a little more mature, whatever. But the truth is that the message overall is the same, no matter how you present it. And so I don't think there's this need to focus so much on, this generational gap, as much as it is just saying, hey, what we have, the most powerful message that could ever be known to man, and how are we going to reach people with that? And just use the tools you have to make the most of that. Well, this has been a really exciting, unique episode. I've really enjoyed this. And, an episode like this, our podcast in general is not possible without our listeners, but an episode like this especially would not happen if it were not for the fact that you as the listener are listening and you're providing feedback and sending in questions. So we really appreciate those questions. Keep them coming. Don't hesitate to reach out to us by providing us with feedback and questions. Once again, always you can email them to podcast@mustincrease.com, but of course you can connect with us on social media, and we really appreciate it when you leave us a review in the iTunes store or wherever you're listening to podcasts there. Boost our ratings. It helps us out. So thank you so much for that. And of course, if you haven't yet, be sure to subscribe to our podcast, and we deliver a new episode every week. And so be sure to subscribe wherever you're listening to podcasts. And we're so grateful when you also help spread the word about the podcast with others by sharing on social media, or by, simply just reaching out to someone and personally recommending the podcast to them. That will go a long way and will mean a lot to whoever you reach out to, and it will mean a lot to us because you shared. Well, Bo, thanks as always for being with us. And thank you, Bo. Always, I like to give him a shout out from time to time, a little extra shout out, if you will, for producing our podcast. He does a lot of work behind the scenes other than this little bit of time on the mic that you hear from him to make this happen. So thanks, Bo, for being here and for being our producer.
Absolutely. Honored to be here.
And thanks for joining us here on the Must Increase podcast, where our mission is to increase His name through your church.